Howdy, folks. Happy Wednesday. Happy hump day. We have lots to talk about. Another buyout, and we'll lead off with that when Ek gets here in a few minutes, but we'll start with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
So some news in the NFL. The Tennessee Titans and Steelers have postponed their game. The NFL has, because there were 3 players and 5 employees that tested positive. Now, see, this is going to be the trick in the traveling part of these teams. Yes, there's a huge roster of replacement players that the league can throw in and are going to throw in and water down the product. There's not a huge roster of team personnel and or coaches that could easily be subbed in and out. And that could be a problem for teams. And that's something that I don't even think the NFL thought about.
Well, the question I have is how, okay, unless they both have the same bye week, how can they make up the game? It will
They're playing Monday or Tuesday, I think.
Okay.
That's the hope.
Postponed on Sunday, they're playing Monday, Tuesday, and right now the difference also is Minnesota, who just played Tennessee, hasn't had any positive cases, so there's a fairly good probability that their game won't have to be moved back or rescheduled. But then they announced today that the game will not be on Sunday. It's either going to be Monday or Tuesday, and still as part of Week 4. Granted, there's clearly, as Ek would say, a domino effect, right? Because the later you play, especially on Tuesday, it shortens your preparation time then for Week 5.
Yeah, I mean, there's games all over that are going to have problems all year. This is just the start, honestly. But again, I don't think they took into account like team personnel. Like, the Raiders got fined a couple weeks ago because some team personnel was in the locker room and they shouldn't have been. And that's where teams have to be very careful, and the league's trying to be. But again, you lose a couple of coaches to COVID, and a team's going to have a problem. Like, a head coach can only take over so much. So this week, it's only their preparation that's really been affected. Who knows what next week brings? And that's what I'm saying. This is, and the NHL could watch this. This could end up being a very slippery slope for the NFL. If 1 or 2 more teams get it, like MLB did, then they're going to start having an effect too. Now, MLB had a lot more games, so they were able to overcome it. The NFL doesn't, so that's
do we know how the Titans players, how they contracted it?
No, nope. 3 players and 5 staff members, I think.
Yeah, and we don't know how. Right,
so that obviously, and you talked about baseball right now. Each team is playing the first round of the postseason in their own home parks, but then starting with the divisional round, they all move to the alternate locations where it's a quasi bubble. So you wonder, is the NFL going to have to start considering that for the playoffs as well, even before the Super Bowl? You're going to have the conference championships, maybe.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to, because I think this is the start. I think there'll be a little bit more of this, unfortunately.
Now, Russ, I didn't get a chance to mention this. DJ LeMahieu won the AL batting title. I put an asterisk next to that, obviously, because there was only a 60-game season, but he's like the first one, I think it's since Ed Delahanty in the late 19th or early 20th century to win a batting title in the American and National League. I think everything in terms of awards, everything in terms of batting averages and benchmarks for this year have to be thrown out, or at least mitigated by the fact that it was a 60-game season. But the question I have is, Lucas Giolito yesterday had a perfect game going into the 8th inning.
7th inning. First at bat single by Tommy LaStella in the 7th.
Yeah, so if he had pitched a perfect game, that's like something that I don't think would have been mitigated. It's a perfect game. It doesn't matter.
I'm not sure. I mean, I think you're probably right. But again, I also think we realize that this isn't exactly up to par perfect baseball that we're watching. That's for sure. We're not. And a lot of these teams would never be in the playoffs. They wouldn't be. Sure. And so you do have to sort of count it that way. Is it the same as Don Larson? Like, no, it's not.
Well, but you can't really say that, right? Because
you can. You look at strength of competition.
Until 1969, you never had divisional. You never had 2 teams meeting, right? The champions went straight to the World Series. Does that mean if somebody happened in 1969, you discount it because there was
no? But those champions were full season champions. These are partial season teams and teams that are into the playoffs because on normal years wouldn't even be sniffing the playoffs.
Well, was Halladay when he pitched for the Phillies? Was it a perfect game or a no hitter in the playoffs?
No hitter.
Okay.
But I'm just saying they are different. And again, I don't even care if you tell me somebody's hit league won the batting title in both leagues now because both leagues are the same with the DH. There's no difference anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
So who cares?
I just think you're bifurcating a bit too narrowly. That's all. I understand the view. I just I think like something in an individual game, I think it's different than a seasonal record. And I think even if you don't asterisk the seasonal record, I think people are going to recognize down the road that it was a 60 game or a shortened season. But again, you've had strike shortened seasons that have been smaller than 162 or 154 also. So,
I mean, I watched the game. He cut through him like butter. Was he good? Sure. Was he that good? I don't know. I mean,
just like with the playoffs and the bubble, we're going to have things in baseball that are going to be surprising in the postseason. And to me, though, like the one yesterday was not only Houston beating Minnesota, who I think they've lost like 13 or 14,
17
playoff games. It's absolutely insane. But a guy like Bieber, who is going to win the AL Cy Young, was a gas can yesterday against the Yankees in Game 1. So, it gets. I think everything that was even accomplished in the regular season gets thrown out when it's a playoff, even if it's an expanded playoff.
Right, it always does. I mean, even in a regular year,
in a regular year, it does.
Completely different. Playoffs are a whole different animal.
But I do know that everybody is rooting against the Astros and will be pissed off if they beat Minnesota because everybody hates the Astros.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the Astros, there's still a day of reckoning here in the sense that they didn't really face anything. They really didn't. They had a few suspensions, but they really didn't face much, and so they're kind of getting away with it.
Yeah,
that's all.
All right,
here goes. Ready?
Yep.
Thanks for talking about that other sport for a while.
Yes. We know you don't like it.
I was watching it yesterday. It's cool. It's cool. It's a sport. I'll watch it. Hello, Hockey World. It's Wednesday, September 30th, 2020.
I'm Michael Agello, and it's raining like cats and dogs in Buffalo.
I'm Jan Levine, and fare thee well, Henrik Lundqvist.
Huss Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Ekman, and it's a beautiful fall day here in the Northeast. Maybe not where you are, Mike, but where we are in the Northeast, it is frigging phenomenal outside.
You're getting this rain tomorrow, so enjoy.
Maybe. I hate the hot weather.
We had it yesterday, so
we did.
And we're getting more on Friday morning too. So
happy to be. So let's get on. We got some rumors to get into today, and I think we're gonna jump right into it. But we're also gonna, because we have Jan for the first little bit of the show here, we're gonna talk about Lundqvist and then a Rangers rumor that I have.
Okay.
So Lundqvist, I mean, we said so much about him. I don't know what else to say, but Jan. I mean, you've been watching Lundqvist for, it feels like as long as you can remember the Rangers had Lundqvist,
Yeah, I mean, obviously, granted, I still go back. I mean, Russ goes back a little further than me slightly, but, I still remember, first recollection, as I've talked about, and I wrote in my initial blog, was watching the 72 Stanley Cup Finals against the Bruins as a 4-year-old kid. So I go back a decent way. And obviously, Lundqvist in 2005, granted, he wasn't even supposed to be the goalie. For all we talked about Kevin Weeks as being, a broadcaster. Weeks was the goalie back then initially, and then Lundqvist kind of took over and just ran with it. And you look at teams that surrounded him and how poor they were for several years. I mean, you look back at the 2002 President's Trophy and the run they made losing to the Devils, and that was a team that was a Tortorella-run team where it's blood and guts, and the identity was block every shot, and offensively they were challenged at best, and he carried that team. And then you look in 2014 and talk about, puck luck has been talked about, and him dueling Jonathan Quick and having a tremendous series, and then unfortunately losing 2 games in double overtime and 1 game in overtime. And when the contract was signed, and look, let's face facts, he did not give the Rangers any real kind of hometown discount. He got the 7 years, he got the $8.5 million per year. Pretty much, maybe could have gotten a little more elsewhere, but extracted fairly close to full value out of the Rangers. And look, he was the franchise. He was the face of the franchise. He was called the king for a reason. He won a Team Sweden, carrying them to an Olympic gold medal, carrying the Rangers to 2 Eastern Conference Finals and one Stanley Cup run. Just the ridiculous amount of saves. You remember clearly the one against Montreal, the spinning back save, the game we were all at in terms of the penalty shot by Briere and Robin Briere on a ridiculously called penalty shot to save the Winter Classic. And the smile, the close, the look. I mean, he epitomized New York. He was New York. He was Madison Avenue. But the thing that he also was a worker. He was a grinder. He was willing to get down and dirty and basically get his hands dirty in terms of the kind of saves and the workload that he faced. So, look, time ends for everybody. I would have obviously much rather see him retire than play in another jersey, and I'm sure they explored all options before they came to this conclusion.
Yeah, they did.
It's an unfortunate end, but as all good things unfortunately must come to an end. But he will always be number 30, and the jersey and the number will be raised to the rafters when he retired, and he's going to sail into the Hall of Fame 3 years after his career ends.
Yeah, I think there's no question he's a Hall of Famer right away.
And I just want to point out, I didn't have any Rangers sources. I was just hoping it would end a different way, and it wouldn't end like this. And it did. So, like, that's the way it goes. That's sometimes is the business. I don't know how many teams were interested. I don't know if they weren't interested because of the money. I don't know if the Rangers didn't want to retain. I don't know any of that. But what I do know is one of the games that I covered in 2014 in Pittsburgh, Lundqvist set a lot of records. And for all the, haters of him, this is where he sets himself apart from even someone like Mike Richter. As an example, he won 5 Game 7s in a row when he beat Pittsburgh that night 2-1. Mike Lang said that was the best performance he's ever seen from any goalie coming into that building and winning in a Game 7 against anybody in Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh's had a long and great history. They also came back from a 3-1 series deficit, the first time they ever did that in franchise history. So there's a lot of things he did lead that team to. But as a goalie, you can't lead a team to a championship all the time. There's other factors. Like that year, they had a really good chance. And I covered a game against Tampa, and all of a sudden Ryan McDonough went out on the ice. He tried out his foot. It didn't work. He went in. I texted someone, this series is over, and it was over. Like that was, that's not Lundqvist's fault. That was just players get banged up and their luck ran out because of that. Like that's what happens. But that's not his fault. And he is one of the best competitors I've ever seen. I'll tell you, it's hard. I think it's easier to see and count a forward as a great competitor as compared to a goalie, but it's a different kind of competition because a lot of times you're by yourself. A lot of times you're working by yourself. You're with your team, but you're not. You're on your own island half the time. And he handled all of that great. And he handled this year great. He could have been a real pain in the ass this year if he wanted to be, and he wasn't. So I wish him a lot of luck. Honestly, we don't know what he's going to do. I mean, I'm assuming he's not retiring, but we don't know. He might change his mind. Like I don't even know if he knows what he's going to do yet, but he's certainly not telling anybody.
Well, I think that will depend, obviously, on the interest that he gets on October 9th. Well, now that he's bought out, he can actually sign before.
He's already talking to teams today. I've already talked to 3 teams at least who talked to him.
But this is the situation. And, you're reporting what you're being told by sources. So, it's not your report about him and New Jersey is not a reflection of, you've been told that, so you're reporting it. I just believe, based on the fact that he's 38 years old, he hasn't won a cup, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. I don't think he's going to a team that is likely a borderline team that could, but probably wouldn't make the playoffs. If he's going someplace, he's going to a Colorado. He's going to a team that has a chance to win, like a la Ray Bourque. Where now the thing is, you could say, is he in a position still in a place in his career where he can get that team over the top? I don't know. Like if he's Colorado, he's probably sharing a role with Pavel Francouz, and they probably trade Grubauer, or otherwise they carry 3 goalies, or they send one of the goalies to the minors. So
they could send Francouz to the minors, but the thing is,
I don't think it would be smart to get rid of Grubauer.
Anytime, right? I don't think it would be either. Anytime he gets added to a team, even if he's getting added with the possibility that he's the backup, injuries happen. Like he knows that, and you never know. He got a chance this year that didn't look like that was going to happen either. So you never know what's going to happen.
And remember, they went to him when they were going through this rebuild, right? And they asked him if he wanted to leave. His comment is he wanted to stay. So the opportunity was afforded to him when the rebuild was starting 2 years ago to have basically tried to exercise an option to go somewhere else. He decided not to, right? And unfortunately, it's ended up ending this way now. As a Ranger fan, if he retires, to me, that's almost even more painful because they bought him out and ate $5.5 million on the cap, as opposed to him just telling them they're going to hang him up. But as Mike is saying, right, part of that depends on how the market filters out, where there's a level of interest. In Colorado makes sense. I know some people have said go to Tampa and be a backup in Tampa because they'd have a shot. And granted, look, he got 2/3 of the money he was going to get, right? So that's anywhere – it's 2/3 of 5.5 or 4.5 million, depending on if the bonus gets factored in. if he gets a 1 year, $2 million deal somewhere, he's still going to be net and making what he was probably going to make if he stayed here from a salary perspective.
Correct. So, but I really do think it's going to depend on potential landing spots. If it's New Jersey, Buffalo, Detroit, he's retiring. If it's teams that have a legitimate chance to win and he can contribute, being the competitor that he is, being the class act that he is, I can see him signing a 1 year deal someplace to be a part of a championship run. Otherwise, I don't know. I just don't think he's going to continue.
Well, 3 teams I heard today that talked to him. Colorado is one of them. It is possible, that's one of them. New Jersey's one of them, as I mentioned before, and they were on it immediately. I was told this morning from a very good source, and Carolina is another. So the question we can all ask ourselves is, who is more likely to make the playoffs next year, Carolina or New Jersey? Now,
Carolina.
You could probably immediately say Carolina, which you all just did. But you got to remember that Lundqvist is in goal now for one of those teams, and there's no reason to think. New Jersey was on a certain trajectory, I think, that was better than people realized, and I think that last year they took a step back. Next year they could take 2 steps forward.
But it wasn't the goaltending last year that impeded them, because I thought Blackwood actually played pretty well.
Blackwood played well, but here's the thing: it's not. He was good, and I know that Lundqvist apparently has shown some interest in that he thinks Blackwood's really good too, and that he thinks he would like to help him or mentor him possibly. But here's the thing about this is, Lundqvist, gives a certain confidence to a younger team too that the Blackwood might not necessarily give. Just having Blackwood's a good goalie, but having a guy like Lundqvist definitely brings a huge amount of confidence, especially to a Devils team that really just looks up to him. They really do. They really do. I mean,
they still need defense in front of them,
right? And I said during the qualifying round when the Rangers played Carolina that the Rangers, of the 5 goalies in the series, the Rangers had the top 3. So a 38-year-old Lundqvist is a definite upgrade over the sieve known as James Reimer or Peter Mrazek, who's inconsistent as all get out. So that's an upgrade for Carolina. And obviously, if you think he would provide a team with confidence, like a team like New Jersey, who's inexperienced, he would definitely provide a team like Carolina, who suffered with bad goaltending in the last 2 playoffs.
Yeah, no, I agree.
New Jersey makes sense because you've talked about, obviously, proximity-wise, if he wants to remain on the East Coast and not have to go anywhere, clearly
he doesn't have
New Jersey affords him that option.
Yeah. Not having to move is probably a big deal to him. I mean, he's lived in the same place for a very long time. He's lived in the same, in the same region, in the same city. I mean, and not having to move is a big deal. I mean, for your family and everything like that, if you're only going to play 1 more year, say, it's a big deal. And yeah, I think he's going to be, do I think he makes New Jersey a contender if he goes there? No. But I think that the amazing amount of people who are writing off New Jersey is really, anyway, that's all I'll say about that. Let's go and move on to the other trade, and especially because of just who I'm talking to in New Jersey. Moving on to the next trade rumor possibility. This came out of nowhere for me, and it may have been talked about on the internet. You may have seen it, guys. You may have seen somebody writing about it somewhere else, but I hadn't really heard much about it. And here's what I'll say is that Sean Monahan, who we all heard Johnny Gaudreau's name mentioned a lot, but I had not really heard Monahan's name mentioned. I mean, you hear every name mentioned, but I hadn't heard it mentioned by people I really trusted that couldn't do something. And now suddenly, right after the Lundqvist thing, I hear, the Rangers are kind of gearing up to get Sean Monahan. That was really a surprising thing. I mean, it makes sense, of course. He's a second line center, and Mike, you pointed that out in our text thing.
Right, sure. And it also fits in the sense that if you look at the Rangers, if you look at Calgary, and you look at the needs of both teams, the big need, especially going into free agency and this offseason for Calgary, is the right side of their defense with Hamonic and Brody. Our UFAs, and also Michael Stone, who is mostly a depth defenseman, but the entire right side of their blue line is gone.
But now you're talking about possibly losing Gaudreau and Monahan. I don't see where that's a plan.
Well, no. What I was going to say, Ross, is that you beat me to the punch. The problem
I'm sorry.
They Monahan is their number 1 center. And then you're creating a hole by trading Monahan to fill another hole. What is the easier hole to fill? A number 1 center or the right side of the blue line? Now, I would assume that if they're talking Monahan, that D'Angelo has to be involved in this because he's a right-hand defenseman, and he's, but on a new contract, he might make just as much as Monahan. Monahan's making a little over $6 million. So I don't know if it's savings or if it's position or if they think they can get another center to replace Monahan as the number one. Number one centers don't grow on trees. So that's why I'm a little skeptical. But, I mean, I can see the possibilities.
I'll let Jan go because he's only got a few minutes.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, look, I think we talked about Monahan right after Calgary was eliminated and also after the Rangers were eliminated because on the face of it, as you said, it makes sense between the two teams. I don't think Monahan had a particularly great year last year. I clearly nowhere near where he was in the past. I mean, he and Goodrow both, John and Goodrow both struggled a bit over the past season. 3 years, $6.375 million is probably the range for a second-line center, though still a bit pricey. Based upon what you're kind of hoping for. If the Rangers are going to do that, right, that pretty much means that Ryan Strome is gone. And you're going to have to find a place for him to move. And then if you're going to move somebody, there's a good possibility also you may end up moving DeAngelo. But remember, with the buyout of Lundqvist and also the trade of Stahl, New York now has $23 million of cap space, even though they have $13 million of dead cap space on the books. Right. So they still can be creative and still might be able to have Monahan and potentially another chip in there, but I think Calgary is most likely going to want a defenseman like DeAngelo to come back in any sort of deal if they're going to be willing to move Monahan.
Right.
Yeah, I just don't know where they're getting centers from. I mean, even if they wanted Ryan Strome in a trade, they'd have to sign him too. Like, it's like I just don't know. Yeah. They're not strong at center, right. So this would really surprise me.
It would make Michael Backlund their number one center if they trade.
I mean, even if you get someone in free agency, you're not getting the right center. Yes, of course, this looks great for the Rangers, and yes, they would trade DeAngelo in a heartbeat for this. But I don't. There's got to be something else to this because I don't see why they would do this because they just kill themselves down the middle.
Well, I think it's like you've talked about also, right? And so did you. Remember the whole Minnesota, right, with Stahl being traded. We talked originally when Calgary was eliminated about a culture change, about wanting to change the faces.
Yeah, but they at least have a bunch of centers there. They don't in Calgary.
I understand that, but I'm saying irrespective of positional, right? They've talked about, if you're going to talk about guys like Gaudreau and Monahan, you're talking about guys that have been faces of that organization for a while.
They are the Calgary Flames, right? Like over the last 5 or 6 years, Gaudreau, Monahan, that's the Calgary Flames.
Yep. So that I mean, Lindholm could also maybe move back to the middle, can he, Russ? He has.
I mean, I guess if you have to, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is that it makes no sense if a deal between the Rangers and Calgary includes Zibanejad, who has 2 years left in his contract. I mean, Monahan's got longer term, but the whole purpose of the Rangers getting Monahan is to have a 1-2 punch with Zibanejad, to have offensive depth in your lineup. So including him, unless it's a trade for the sake of making a trade, and the Rangers don't think they can get Zibanejad signed when his contract expires after next season.
I mean, are they going to trade for Max Domi and just let him play center because he wants to? Like, are they going to just do something like that to fill a spot? Like, I don't see where they're going to have meaningful ways of filling the center position, which would kill them in the West. It really would kill them.
And I don't see Zibanejad going anywhere. It's feasible.
No, he's not going to go.
And Valamaki's mentioned in the chat room because he had issues with concussions in the past, but he is their true number one center.
What are your thoughts of Valimaki, Russ? I mean, he is mentioned in the chat room. He's the guy.
Valimaki? Yeah, he's definitely a trade chip. There's no question.
Oh, right. He's a center, right? Isn't he a center?
No. He's a defenseman.
I'm sorry. I thought he was a center. That's what I know about prospects.
That would be on top of Monahan because he's on Calgary right now. But no, this is the problem. I'm looking at the list of restricted and unrestricted free agent centers right now. Other than like say they trade Monahan, is Brad Treliving going to go out there and sign Matthew Barzal to a offer sheet for $9 million, something that Lou Lamoriello wouldn't match? No, he's not going to. Is he going to offer sheet Pierre-Luc Dubois? No. Where do you get a number one center? You and if you're not intent on being a contender in the West and being a playoff team, then why aren't you trading Mark Giordano, who's in his mid-30s and has a couple years left in his contract? If this is a strip down and you're gonna trade Goudreau,
strip down. I don't think it's
and so one more thing, Funky talked about the Nugent Hopkins for DeAngelo. Nugent Hopkins got one more year left in his UFA, and he's going to want probably $8 million a year.
Yeah, he's going to price himself out.
I like Nugent Hopkins. I don't like him enough to trade. D'Angelo could be signed longer term, especially a guy who may only be here for a year. So it's not – I mean, guys on my blog have talked about it repeatedly, wanting to make that trade. To me, honestly, I think Nugent Hopkins has been better on the wing than he has been at center ever since he got moved over to wing periodically. So that's not a move necessary that I would be making, though. I could see something of that ilk, especially with the news with Oscar Klefbom today, where it's possible his injury woes could sideline him somewhere into next season.
Yeah.
I'll just
I got another thing to go into.
Well, they have Bouchard, luckily.
Let me just finish with this, Ek.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were talking last week about the 3 players who potentially would be buyouts with the Rangers: Stahl, Smith, and Lundqvist. Now, Stahl's been traded, and Lundqvist has been bought out. You could have put a pretty big wager that the guy who would survive of those 3 was Brendan Smith, because in my mind, he's the worst of the 3.
I don't know about that. He's making the least amount of money out of him. He also has the flexibility between forward and defense. So and also, honestly, and the fun fact is, he is the oldest Ranger now at 29 years old.
You know what's hilarious about that, Jan? I was thinking about that. Funny. He has been in trade rumors since the moment he got there. And he's still there. Every year. I mean, I read so many Brendan Smith trade rumors over the year. It's just ridiculous. But yet he's still there.
I mean, Brendan Smith really, at this point, he'll have a good game or so. He still takes dumb penalties. He still turns the puck over. He's not very good.
For the 1 year left, that doesn't make sense, right? After this season, his contract is up. So
I know. They'll ride it out. They will.
All right. So another thing I haven't written about yet, but I've been chasing this since I put my blog up.
Sure.
It's probably one of the more interesting things that I've gotten in a while. So I'm going to throw it out here and pretend when you see my blog to be surprised, everyone. Okay. So, but it was just too interesting not to bring up now, and that is Oliver Ekman Larson stuff, which I was trying to basically steer clear of to a degree, because it's such a hard they have to clear so much cap space, but he is almost unmovable in some ways because he does have a no movement clause, right? Isn't that true?
Right. He has I believe it's a limited trade.
Yeah, I think he has a list.
Yeah, I'll check. Hold on. But go ahead.
Angle better. All right. So so I think that the reality is, but they are trying to clear space. And the problem with, they have another guy on their team that they want to move out, which is Phil Kessel, right? And Phil Kessel is obviously one of the guys who is almost, again, untradeable. Phil Kessel has a huge amount of money, doesn't make, he's this year and next year. He's got 2 years left on his deal. And he was so ineffective this year.
Larson has a full no move. Kessel has a modified no trade and a no move. So he can't go. That being said, now this is the crazy thing about that is the concept that I heard somebody tell me I had somebody tell me today that they have tried to package them together. Okay, now the concept of Ekman, Larson, and Kessel together in a deal. Now you're talking about a ton of money. So that's $15 million.
Right. It's $15 million, and they have to clear $15 million, right?
Only Seattle could handle that.
Yeah. Now right?
Detroit,
Ottawa,
Detroit would never do it.
And another team
wouldn't want Kessel. That's why
could possibly do it, and Kessel would go to, and perhaps they could convince Larson to go there because they've gotten some Swedish players recently. Is the Minnesota Wild, and the concept of Dumba going back in the trade as well. So it's not completely clearing.
I don't know. Can the Wild even float that? I'm not sure.
In terms of cap,
they would have to do more.
They'd
have to do more than that for sure. But if they gave Dumba back with, I was told, some salary retained, so that Dumba's salary would end up. His salary, I think, is 6 right now. Dumba's salary somewhere in there.
Correct.
For how many years, Mike?
So they have to retain some Dumba salary and take all of OELs. They're going to have to move somebody out for sure.
Right, take OELs and Kessel's salaries. So the concept there is Kessel would go to Minnesota, right? I mean, that's not going to be an impossible possibility for him because he's from that area, right? Then you have Oliver Ekman Larson. You have he's
8.25. Kessel's 6.8. So you're talking about 15.05 million salary.
And taking back, say they take back 4 of Dumba's, which was I was told somewhere in that range. So so basically you're getting an $11 million cap hit to Minnesota, and because they would or no, $13 million cap hit to Minnesota still, even if they only retain 2 or 3, so $13 million, whatever you want to say, somewhere in that range. It's a huge amount of money, but you are getting Oliver Ekman Larson, who is a great defenseman. You are getting perhaps Phil Kessel, who could perhaps be revived playing in Minnesota. Who knows? I don't think so, but and at the end of the day, you move Dumba.
I mean, I would say it this way. I think Guerin would actually probably have to have a long discussion with Kessel before even trying to trade for him, just knowing how aging forwards are and seeing where he's at as far as his seriousness and getting his career back, because right now it's going the wrong way. It's been going the wrong way. And Guerin, there's no way he's going to spend that kind of money unless he's really got assurances that he's going to be the old Phil Kessel. And I just don't think that's going to happen.
Now we know that any deal that Arizona makes, they're going to it's going to be financially beneficial, meaning they're going to trade more cap space going back in the deal. And okay, say for example, this is reality, and it's Kessel and Ekman Larson going to Minnesota. If it's Dumba going back, I don't know if I see money being retained on Dumba, because you're already saving 2.25 on end term over 7 years.
You got that right, and there also would be, by the way, there'd also be
Victor Rask,
some draft picks going back to Arizona too. It's not just, you got more draft picks too. Like it wouldn't be money going back, but Arizona needs draft picks, obviously. So you'd have.
But I could see, like, if you're talking about like a Victor Rask who makes $4 million the next 2 years going as part of this, or Dubnyk if they want to move on from Dubnyk, if Arizona is trading Darcy Kemper someplace else, then it makes more sense, because Arizona, Bill Armstrong is under basically orders to pare down their roster and pare down the payroll. And if that's the case, then some of the deals might not make a lot of sense, because simply they're trying to clear money.
No, you're exactly right.
But I think they would get more of a return, because the two teams that were mentioned by I believe it was Pierre LeBrun yesterday were Edmonton and Boston. And Boston makes a ton of sense because they're rumored to be in on Pietrangelo. If they're not in on him, the cost certainty of Ekman Larson, because his cap hit's going to be 8.25 for the next 7 years. They were potentially in on him when he was potentially going to be a UFA, and they have a lot of young assets and draft picks, so it would fit as well. So I mean, it's possible Minnesota, but there are other possibilities as well.
I mean, and the other one is Ottawa. Is a team that can do this, but why would those two players go to Ottawa? That was the question that was. And
why would Melnick take on?
Yeah, why is he paying that money?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So another rumor that's out there today, and there are some people who think this is absolutely insane, and there are some people who say that it could happen. So we usually, when I get both extreme edges of that, I think it's something interesting, and that is the idea of we've talked about Yzerman weaponizing salary, weaponizing salary cap stuff, and to do that with PK Subban, to bring PK Subban to Detroit, along with some kind of draft picks or something, because New Jersey has some picks, and then you could possibly see that. Now, I talked to people who were close to the situation, and some people just laughed at it, and then 2 other people said, "Yeah, you want to laugh at it, but at the same time, there's a definite method to what Yzerman is doing right now."
Well, okay, the Devils have 3 first-round picks,
right?
One in the top 7 or 8. I think there's 7.
I think there's 7.
And then they have 18 and 20. Based on the Mark Stahl deal, they would probably ask for one of those first to take Subban's $9 million contract. Now, this is the thing. I would bet if they did something like that Yzerman would turn around, retain 50% of Subban's salary, and move him someplace else for more draft picks or prospects, because then Subban all of a sudden is a commodity at $4.5 million, and they're so far underneath the cap that they could use that cap hit for the next 2 years to get to the cap floor. So I don't think they would keep him. I think they would flip him.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting twist.
Maybe.
That they could probably find a place if because half of Subban's salary is definitely flippable, for sure. And there's lots of teams out there would take the.
But again, I
right-handed defenseman.
I have to go back and ask the question. So even with Ty Smith coming, if the Devils have any hopes of competing, getting rid of Subban doesn't help their blue line.
No.
Ty Smith helps it a little bit. Now all of a sudden they're short of veterans again on their blue line. Severson never gets used right on that team. Like, what are they doing?
But just think of it this way, Russ. We know how fiscally responsible Josh Harris is.
But he still wants to try and do something in the vein of winning for Fitzgerald. I get the fiscal part,
right?
But even if they went on in a free agent market, you might spend $2 million less than Subban, but you're not really getting anything.
Right, but I've always been saying that, we've always been talking about like Subban being traded and that the Devils would bemoan retaining salary. In this scenario, they would retain nothing and they would be able to go out and spend that money on players that could help them win, because obviously the way Subban played last year, he didn't help them win squat.
Okay, but just think about it. So they're not getting Pietrangelo, right? He's not going to go there. Who are they going to get on the blue line? They don't. After that, they don't have much.
Right.
They have Severson, they have Smith, they have Will Butcher, they have.
Well, I've heard Matt Dumba.
That's not much of an NHL defense, is it?
Matt Dumba to New Jersey for draft picks could happen. I've heard that as well. That's a possibility. And there's something,
okay,
I think Dumba's a good fit. Dumba's a good fit in New Jersey. If you got extra draft picks, that's not a bad idea.
Even if they got Dumba and lost Subban, they're still not even close to a playoff team. Even if they picked up two guys in free agency, they're probably not a playoff team.
I know Dumba moving. There've been all kinds of thoughts, okay, he's definitely got to move. And then, Guerin said, well, we could play with him all season. We don't have to move him. I did hear that one team in the West, the Edmonton Oilers, made a really strong pitch for Matt Dumba.
Oh, I could see that.
Yeah.
And Minnesota apparently didn't even go for it at all, which led Edmonton to think that they weren't going to trade him to the Western Conference at all, which is
probable.
I mean, I understand that you trade superstars. Dumba's a good player. Really solid.
Yeah, he's not a superstar, but he's a real good player.
But do you have to worry? I mean, I guess you think that that's the guy that could help the Oilers put him over the top. The Oilers are a scary team to trade to, because you don't want to be the team that trades the player that puts them over the top, because then they could be on the top for a while.
That's true, but I do think Guerin would hesitate to trade him to the West. I do.
Yeah, especially to Edmonton. To me, that's like Edmonton or Vancouver, like two teams that are like right there on the edge. Are teams that you don't want to.
I mean, I'm sure Philly would offer him Gostisbehere, and I don't know if Guerin would do that for Dumba. I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I really don't.
It's especially when we know the market for right-hand shot defensemen this offseason is so. I mean, if Guerin does not get a king's ransom for Dumba, then he's abrogating his responsibility. Okay, he's abrogating his responsibility as a general manager, because I mean, this is a market where you can get a ton for a guy like Dumba. Now, this is the thing. I think Dumba's a really good defenseman, and I think he's a top 4 righty, but there are holes in his game. He's not a particularly great defensive defenseman. He's an offensive guy. He's physical. He's a good puck carrier. Maybe he could point your power play, but I don't think that he's not a two-way shutdown guy. He's an offensive defenseman. And for teams out there like Toronto, who's looking for more of a two-way guy, I don't think he's a good fit. But for teams that are looking for offense, for a defenseman to score 40 to 45 points and log 20+ minutes, Dumba's great.
One little note that I saw this morning, we'll see if that comes back. Then not, we could always talk draft. But the note I saw is with the SHL now, if you are loaned to an SHL team, you are there for the entire season. So season, playoffs, whatever, which means you still could get back to the NHL for playoffs. But you would miss most of the season. Now, some of the guys that are getting traded to the lower levels, not the SHL, they could come back off a loan, but the other guys can't. And so I saw that Valimaki got loaned, but to a lesser and not an SHL franchise.
I thought it was an SM Liga team. I thought it was
so that's fine. Liga will let them leave early, but the SHL said they will not.
Right, and the Swiss League and the KHL as well. If they have that agreement in place when they.
So that is going to affect this season a little bit, because some guys that maybe some teams were hoping would play there this year can't. Like, as an example, I know Flyers fans, a lot of them thought Linus Sandin had a good chance of making the team. Well, he can't even come to the team until after HV71 season now, because that's just the way it is now. So
and like, okay, I heard some talk about the Canucks, and we know, basically we know they may trade Besser, they may trade other players. Höglander is somebody who's on their radar.
Yeah,
he's playing in the SHL. He's not playing in the in the second
No,
division.
so he can't do anything until the end of their season.
Right. And they may have wanted him to come over and start the season in January.
Correct. So it's definitely going to change some plans for some teams, and that's why a lot of teams are breaking their backs finding guys to go to places like Liga and some of the other leagues, so this way they can get them back, and this way they're playing for a few months.
But at a certain point, Russ, these teams are going to run out of spots. I mean,
they are, and well, that's why I said breaking their backs. It's already become a chore, and now I saw Patrick Williams and a few other people posting that it looks like February for a start in the AHL.
Yeah,
so now you're really going to have a gap for a lot of guys not playing. And I do kind of wonder if the NHL does something temporarily, like saying, all right, look, instead of like that normal 10-game window, we're going to waive that for this year so guys can play until we can think you could send them to the AHL or whatever. They're going to have to do something. I think
have to do something. It brings me to a really interesting topic that I want to discuss. And that was, prospects, because Russ is obviously the prospect guy. Haven't told Russ this yet, so I wanted to get the reaction here. So this is what I heard. Obviously, we know that what happened with the GM with out in Arizona and all the stuff like that. But the NHL now is considering some concepts where teams would be allowed to do basically what he did. Like a situation where, since prospects aren't going to be playing that many games, or some prospects might not be playing at all, where teams would be allowed to have like a weekend event where they could invite people in, just like specifically one weekend or this weekend, and maybe they might do two teams at once. I heard, and have like as scouts go to a place and where they would be able to bring in any prospect they want to, college, whatever, bring them in for that weekend and look at them. Like give them a chance.
Okay, so it would be like not an all-star game, but just like a showing.
Yeah, like they could work them out a little bit. It's basically all that stuff, but fully up on the up and up, because there is a definite fear among scouts that they're not going to get enough chances to see these guys play,
right?
In different situations, and
but that's special circumstance, and then
it's a special circumstance, and it's only for this year. But I'm not saying this would,
Well, there is all right. So there is a thing that's going on even now, right? So we knew even this year with the season cut short and everything, nobody got the viewings that they wanted, but they pretty much had enough even without the playoffs. Plus, you did have previous viewings of players from other seasons and international tournaments. But now that all that stuff's getting pared down, you are going to see more video scouting coming into play. There's just no way around it, because until everybody can have eyes on all these players again, the video part is going to become huge. And so that's something now where you're going to see some teams making some changes that way, maybe adding an extra person or two to the front office who does that to supplement. And I think, it would be a good idea if they had a couple of these type games, like an All-American Prospects type game and, a top prospects game like in the CHL, even if the season wasn't even started yet, just to kind of get everybody to see these players. Because you're right, it is going to be a problem, and that is one way of doing it.
See, there is a lot of time between now, or even say October 9th when you get Razor signs. You go to October 15th, say January 18th or whatever the start date is. That's a whole 3 months. That's like a regular NHL off season. You're not talking.
The only difference is, though, we have the World Juniors, and we still don't know what's up with that. They say it's going to be in a bubble, but you really don't know. I mean, there's definitely a chance the World Juniors might not happen if things got a little worse, because Canada's starting to have an uptick too. It's not like, Quebec has an issue. Maybe Edmonton doesn't, but still there's some issues now coming up in Canada too. So they have to hammer out the World Juniors first act before that.
Well, the World Juniors is definitely, that's going to be like incredibly highly attended by scouts, obviously.
If it all goes well.
If it all gets together.
If they're allowed to, because if
this wouldn't be so much of a game as it would be a workout, I was told. It wouldn't be like, like these situations we've seen before where you have
it'd be like scrimmaging, but
it would be like two teams in the same place. You get half the players in the morning, I get half the players in the afternoon. And then we switch back, there's teams switching back and forth. The players would get to invite whoever they wanted to. They could each invite like 20 guys or something like that. And it would be, in a safe quarantine type situation.
The only thing I wonder is, would players have to sign a waiver? Because if their season hasn't started yet, their team's not going to take responsibility for their medical. What happens with that?
Yeah, it's a darn good question. I mean, I'm sure it can be handled.
Ask somebody that question.
I will. I'm sure it can be handled. I mean, like you've seen these games before that you've talked about.
Way.
These prospect games, and all that has to be worked out for that sort of situation, right?
Because even look, as an example, let's say some colleges let some of their guys go and do that because they know they're not playing to whenever. The player, if a player's on scholarship and he comes back injured and can't play again, that's going to be a problem.
It's a big problem. Yeah. It wouldn't be. I don't think the concept that they're saying they're not being playing games, so it's not going to be that.
No, but you can get hurt just.
You can get hurt in any situation for sure. I mean, there are going to be workouts, and guys are going to have to go hard. I mean, they're going to try to be making impressions.
Rush, I'm sure some of the prospects that go to the World Junior Summer Showcase during the summer that they're probably provided insurance by USA Hockey.
Well, either USA Hockey or the IIHF because it's their thing too. So they're definitely covered for that. But that's the whole thing. It's like, if you're going outside of your regular season, your team regular season, the player might have to purchase his own insurance.
Yeah, or the teams,
or the teams that you're putting together, they may have to have a fund or something. Like, who knows?
Yeah, the concept of the NHL, I think it's not so bad. My initial thought, if I was running this situation with a team, I'd be like, okay, we'll pay for that insurance because we're not paying for all the scouts to travel around and go in those places. So at the end of the day. We're probably making out fine. I don't know how much that insurance would be, but it's hard to say. They aren't making millions of dollars. They do have value to all their teams that are out there. And
they do. And that's the thing. The value to the team is a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. But then again, a lot of those team leagues, they don't even know when they're going to be playing. So it's tough. That's
fair.
So right now they don't even have anywhere to go. And I think in certain situations we'll really see.
I mean, teams are working out already. I mean, I see colleges are skating. Guys are skating. The coach is there, but they're not playing.
Well, that's the interesting thing that I was going to bring up because there still hasn't been any kind of statement from the NHL regarding the 7 teams that have been out of work since March, like Buffalo, Ottawa, Detroit, etc. That didn't make the 2014. Those teams are going to be at a distinct disadvantage because they didn't play at all in the summer.
They almost should go to one place like in Buffalo and play 2 or 3 games each before even their training camps, just to kind of get
the first overall pick. They should have had a tournament. That would have been great.
Well, not even that, but Russ, I mean, at least to have some sort of like a camp to be able to.
Yeah, even if maybe their camps before everybody else's. Maybe that's how you do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that
wouldn't be a bad idea, letting them report a little early.
I mean, I have heard of players already doing some of that. There's the players already working out together in different situations because obviously this is going from March till when camps are going to open, probably in December.
But the other bugaboo is right now it's easy to get ice, even though there's still some restrictions.
Yeah,
and so it's not as plentiful. But for NHL players, they can get it. But if things start to occur where, we start getting a rise in the virus again and we start going back to rinks shutting or being very limited, then you have a problem with that too.
No, you do. And there's almost no way to predict that. So
no,
you're in a spot there, but that's something, this is something I did hear. The other thing I heard that was kind of interesting that we will probably get into more tomorrow, but I wanted to just kind of throw it out there is that there does appear to be there's going to be a realignment this year.
Okay.
For 1 year, a temporary realignment.
And it makes sense because of travel.
Yeah, and it will put the Canadian teams together for sure. I've heard that.
So no U.S. teams are going to go to Canada?
That's
the beginning of the year. Like the season will start off, and whether or not it starts in a bubble or not is going to be dependent on the situations in Canada, the situation in the U.S.
Right.
We're hoping not to start in a bubble. Especially in Canada, because they think, if the numbers still stay low, they can travel around in Canada like Major League Baseball is doing now without too much worry, they're thinking. But you would have a Canadian, you'd have a Canadian division, you'd have basically a Northeast division, a Western division, and a Southern division is what I heard. So that would be,
it makes sense. I mean, I could see it happening for one season because.
But that doesn't cut down on travel. If you're and like we said,
not about cutting down on travel as much as it's about crossing the border.
Right.
Yeah, border crossing is a definite.
What I'm saying is that these teams are not going into bubbles again. They're not doing it. The Players Association players have come out and said we're not doing this again.
Well,
So-
they might not get paid if they don't do it. There's issues.
Back. I mean, then you know what? Then shut down the season. And I'm not. That's easy for me to say because, but I'm just saying it's like the only way we're going to play next year at the start of the season, if it's in December or in January, is if we're playing along the lines of a Major League Baseball type of system or the NFL, where they're traveling to the cities and they're playing the games, but in front of no fans to begin the year. If they do that, then I think they can start the season with no fans and then move to fans later on in the year. Maybe it's not an 82 game schedule. Maybe it's less of a schedule. But the whole, if you're going to have all 7 teams in a Canadian division, that means Toronto will fly to Vancouver twice. Well, actually, no, because if they're going to play inside their own division, what are you going to play? The 6 other teams in the Canadian division? Are you going to play them 82 games? Then
Yeah,
we should mention what you have on Patrick Laine, because there's a lot of stuff on the net, but there's even some phony stuff like NHL Flyers with 2S. Yeah, we've acquired Patrick Laine for a first-round pick, Nolan Patrick and Shane Gostisbehere. Yeah, that wouldn't get it done.
Well, okay,
here's not going to do it.
Here, let Ek further what he's heard, but this is the original report on this is Elliot Friedman from 31 Thoughts. He's saying that they are shopping Line A. It's because like we said on the show a couple days ago, they've got Connor, Ehlers, and Wheeler as 3 of their top paid players that are all wingers. Scheifele's the only center. They need help up the middle, especially if Brian Little's career is in doubt because it is because of I think it was an inner ear problem.
Right.
So he mentions Columbus, Carolina, LA, Philadelphia, and wonders about the Islanders that it would be a sort of a stealth move that would be typical Lou. So I mean, I can see possibilities for all those teams because they have the cap space, they have the assets to move to Winnipeg. What do you
Yeah, I mean, I'll add Montreal to that group for sure. They definitely Montreal has
assets.
Interested in Line A forever. And if he's available, they'll definitely be involved. I do think the Islanders are more than a dark horse in this. If this does indeed happen, and
if that's the case, Russ, the first name out of Kevin Cheveldayoff's mouth should be Noah Dobson.
It could be Matt Barzal. I mean, if they're going to trade for Line A and have to give Line A a new deal, they probably are not going to want to pay Line A and Barzal. I doubt it. So if you think they're interested in Line A, you might as well try and get Matt Barzal, and then talk about Noah Dobson and some other defenseman that they have. At least you'll get somebody else. But yeah, I mean, that's probably what's going to happen because Lou said very cryptically that all of his guys are going to get signed. But you're not one of his guys at that point where he's doling out the money, then he's
what does that mean? All of his guys,
all their players are going to get signed. That's what he said.
Yeah.
If he makes a trade, he's not their player anymore.
Exactly. Lou's very calculated about things like that. So I wouldn't really read too much into it. If Line A gets traded, I would imagine it would be at the draft, and that would be, my thought would be that would be the draft. Let's talk about the draft. Meanwhile, Russ.
Yeah. So let's talk about the draft a little. Let's talk about defensemen. I guess that's a good place to start.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Jamie Drysdale is the guy that I have as the top guy. I don't think there's much debate about that, at least pre-draft. You never know what happens 5 years down the line. Nobody can look into a crystal ball, but right now he, besides speed, besides being a number one, knowing what it takes to be a number one, likes having a target on his back, can play physical and play smart. He really does fit everything and does have the ability to be a first liner and first pairing guy in the NHL. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, I did just hand in a mock, and I'll tell you, I didn't have him going to Detroit only because of the way Cole Perfetti was interviewed by Steve Yzerman. It made me think that Steve Yzerman's super interested in Cole Perfetti, and so that's the only reason. So he might go to Ottawa instead, and Ottawa would already have either Stützle or Byfield. I'd put on the mock that it would be Stützle, that the Kings would eventually settle on Byfield.
I'm putting up here for everybody walking.
Yeah, you could see he's a guy that he is not afraid to to move around with the puck. He's got a great shot. He really and he's got the physical side, but he is a guy that actually told me he likes playing 5-on-5 better than on the power play, in the sense that he said, I know most people say the power play is their favorite thing to do. He goes, I love playing 5-on-5, and you can see why.
Yeah, well, he really looks like a man among boys in these video highlights.
Sometimes he is.
Yeah,
I don't say that often about players, but
he played really well for Canada at the World Junior.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great story there, because he started off as an extra because of his age. Right. Then he started off as like a bottom pair guy who got some minutes, and then he worked his way into, I think second pairing before it was all said and done.
Crazy acceleration. This guy's got crazy acceleration going on.
He has very good acceleration.
Size. I mean, to get move that quickly.
His road up, Russ, I'm pretty sure was the same thing that happened with Makar at our previous World Junior, where he was like the extra guy and then moved up.
Yeah, so, Makar, they misused him.
Yes, early on, and then they realized what they had. The interesting story here, Ek, is that, and Russ knows a lot more about these guys than I do, but there are the two legitimate top defensemen according to most of the experts are Drysdale and Jake Sanderson, the son of Jeff Sanderson, former Hartford, Buffalo, Columbus winger. There just seems to be a lot of confusion in terms of who's going to go first, who's going to go where. They're both going to go probably in the top 10.
Yeah, they'll both go top 10.
Yeah, but I mean, it's all really based on opinion. Who's going to go first? I mean, based on what I've read and what I consider, I think Drysdale should go first. But there are a lot of teams that love Sanderson and think,
stuff.
Yeah, he's a very good skater, like his dad was.
Yeah,
I think he's 6'2", 190 pounds. He's got a lot of.
He'll get stronger. I mean, he's a mistake-free guy. He's really good passer. He is not anywhere near the offensive player that Drysdale is right now. And he had a great second half. We talked to Chris Peters. I told him, he agreed with me in the sense that we both saw him in the USHL Fall Classic, and he looked He looked not great. But by the middle and end of the season, by the time he was playing in some tournaments and the second half of the season with the NTDP, his offense came out a little bit more. He could play the power play. That's not the issue. But the issue is he going to be a 30, 40-point guy or a 60-point guy? And I don't think he measures up like Drysdale that way. The rise that he had reminds me of Noah Hannafin, because Noah Hannafin, never struck me as a guy that was going to provide a lot of offense. I think Sanderson will provide more than Hannafin did, but Hannafin's a really good defender, really good skater. Like, he plays everything else great, and that's what Sanderson does too. That's why so many teams love him. So he's super safe, but doesn't have a massive offensive upside. That's the issue. But
here's the issue when it comes to defensemen. There is a separation between those two and the rest of the defensemen who are projected to go in the first round. Now, it could be 4, 5, 6 defensemen, but you go from Sanderson and Drysdale to a guy like Jeremy Poirier or Braden Schneider, which is somebody who a lot of experts are projecting as the Leafs' first-round pick at 15, or Ryan O'Rourke. I mean, there is a drop-off there. And what I wonder is, and this is like this symptom in any draft, and when there's a limit on positions, do these teams try to move up to get somebody because there's a limit on those guys?
I mean, they will from the bottom up. A team like the Leafs, like I said, I think it's a little early to take Schneider, but if they moved down and took him, I would say, all right, that's better.
Right.
Because I think he would be there. I don't think they have to take him at 15 because I don't think he's a threat to go at 15.
Right.
The interesting thing about Poirier is he had more goals than anybody that we're talking about. He had 20. And he's an excellent skater, but he does have defensive deficiencies, and he is a little bit of a gambler. And so that right now, that could bounce him at the bottom of the first or even out of the first, simply because teams, especially in this era, want to play it safer in the first round with defensemen, because there's not going to be as good a scouting in the next year or so. So you don't want to go for a home run in the top 15. You don't.
Right. And I don't, and the funny thing is, like, I don't think that, we've seen in other drafts in hockey and in football and other drafts where a certain position will go high or will go sooner than was expected. And then all of a sudden there's a run on that position. I don't think that that's going to be the case in this draft because, say, for example, if Sanderson and Drysdale go 4 and 5 to Detroit and Ottawa,
right?
I don't think anybody is going to take any one of the other top-rated defensemen in the top 15 because it would be so much of a reach. I think
I agree. I think it would change the board, but it would change it for the offensive players.
Exactly.
Now Schneider is better defensively than Poirier, but offensively he's good, but he's not like super.
What is the highlights on Snyder's things for him? Like just walloping guys. It seems like he's a hitter.
Yeah, no, he's physical. He has a physical side too. No question about it. He played in the top prospects game, was really good, but I think there's a cap on what you can get offensively out of him, but he is physical and has good defense and is a good skater. Is he as good as Sanderson or Byfield is skating? No. Is he as good as Poirier as a skater? Not sure.
Poirier we're looking at here. So this is some nice stuff on Poirier here, but yeah, he definitely looks smooth for sure.
Yeah, Poirier has that ability where if it all hit, he could be like a Thomas Chabot light. He could be something like that.
And the one concern,
crazy moves for a defenseman there.
The one concern that I've heard about Schneider is the fact that, and this isn't as much of a bugaboo now as it was maybe a few years ago. He had his best offensive year last season, 42 points. He's 19 years old, so he went through the draft last year and didn't get picked.
Yeah. Now I'll tell you the great enigma for me. And yeah, he'll get picked this year, though, Mike. Like it happens.
I'm just saying it's very strange that a guy who's going to be a first-round pick,
I know,
went completely through 7 rounds and nobody picked.
It has happened before, but it is strange. Caden Gooley's kind of like the weird wild card here because it's the brother of Brendan. He is already faster than what Brendan was. That was always what sort of held Brendan back because he had a lot of other tools. Still does. Gooley is very physical, so they like his physicality. He gets a lot of offense at the junior level, but I kind of wonder how much of that is going to transfer when he moves up because he's a bigger, faster, stronger guy than a lot of junior players. So you can dominate almost offensively there, where in like the NHL, you're not going to be able to.
Well, Russ,
I'm watching some of these Poirier highlights, in there. You're seeing a lot of these really fancy moves, and you're like saying that he's not going to be able to pull these off against NHLers. Like these aren't.
Some of them he won't be able to, but the skating and the stick work he can.
Oh yeah, no, he's got really strong stick work.
Yes.
Well, Russ, I wonder, and sometimes players don't get sort of tarred with the same feathers that their siblings do, but. Brendan Gooley was a highly regarded prospect with the Sabres, never really came through for them, and then he was traded to Anaheim, hasn't come through for them. How much is his failures to be able to break through passed on to his younger brother?
I don't think a lot because the teams are pretty high on him. I think they are able to see that there's a speed difference there, and because they like everything else. Like this, you're talking about a guy with size and strength and speed. And so on the blue line, you want that. But like I said, depending on where you take him, you are going to, maybe have a decent offensive guy, but maybe not a great one. So as an example, like I have Sanderson going 8th to the Sabres, right? I just think because of all the USA Voices, former NTDP guys, they're going to talk him up a lot, and I don't blame them. But like when I'm talking about Gooley, it's like a lot of teams could use him. I ended up having him go to the Devils because they have the 3 first-round picks and because they need defense, could afford to roll the dice on a guy like that. Plus, they do need someone who can be physical in their system at some point, and I think that's where that could be a really good fit for them.
Now, coming off of this, and I wanted to get everybody's thought on this. Pierre LeBrun mentioned about Tampa, like we talked about Tampa yesterday, and that they need basically to clear $10 million in salary to be in the ballpark to be able to re-sign and extend Cirelli and Sergachev. The names that are out there, obviously, that we've talked about were Tyler Johnson, Yanni Gord to a lesser extent. Both of them have no trade clauses, and LeBron said, you know, don't be surprised if it's a name that you don't expect that gets moved out of Tampa Bay. Now, I look at Tampa Bay, and when you look at the other names out there, Palat's got a no trade clause, so they're stuck in the same position when it comes to Gordon Johnson. Killorn has a modified no trade, and he's 30.
I think Paquette's only got one more year on his deal, right?
Paquette, yeah, but it's only $1.6 million, so they really don't clear a lot of space.
No.
If you right now, everybody, the top 3 salary earners on defense and the top 6 of the top 7 and forwards all have no trade or no move clauses. So other than and they're not trading Braden Point. So unless they're trading Cirelli or Sergachev.
There's research on this, Mike, for tomorrow's blog, and I'll tell you that what I heard was along the lines of Sergachev, which was really surprising, but still that was where they would go with it. You know, I talked to Kevin about this, and we've talked about Cirelli as well. Off the air, Cirelli is a possibility, but Sergachev, I think that's a big name for them to do that with. I don't know what other defense they have coming up or what they're looking at, but.
Well, they have Cal Foote, and they Cernak is a good depth guy.
Yeah, I'm not sure Foote's ready yet, though, but he'd be close.
Right, but really,
they could bring
you saw some of the guys that they were flirting with, like Matthew Joseph, also included, and if they can't do Johnson because people just don't want Johnson anymore, I could see Cirelli because he is a guy that's going to be due a contract for them, and so that is a possibility.
Yeah, I don't think it's enough though, because that's what as far as
that cuts down what they expected. That $10 million that they have to open up, because Cirelli, based on the years that he's had, even if they get on a bridge deal, it's going to be a $5 million deal.
Right. So if you don't have to spend that $5, it does help.
Here is Sergachev is probably more than that.
Yes.
So that's why you have to move out Killorn too, and they're deeper. They're deeper in terms of their organizational depth at forward. They've got Radish, they've got Volkov, who they played. Joseph, was up and down. They have I'm not sure if Boris Kachuk is going to.
Kachuk could probably make it as a fill in. I think he had a pretty good year last year. He had like 35, 40 points, something like that. He's a pretty good player. He plays heavy, so he could be one of those bottom 6 guys. But at the end of the day, if they can't move Johnson, if you had to lose Cirelli and Paquette, I probably could live with that more than Sergachev. I don't think they could afford to lose him.
And what they will also rely on, and mark my words, they will be a team, since they just won a cup, they will be a team that veterans who either get bought out or are in free agency will go for 1 year for veteran minimum to have a chance to win the cup again. So if they're, not saying Bobby Ryan will go there, but a Bobby Ryan-like player, if they need to fill a hole for a year vacated by trading Killorn, that they'll be okay, because they'll be able to fill that hole with a veteran guy who they could plug in, who could score 25 to 30 goals playing with Point or Kucherov.
Yeah, I did want to answer in the chat room. Johnny Red said every year prospects get a great or good review, and more than half didn't make it. That happens all the time. There's a lot of factors. A lot of factors are, hey, health is one. A lot of factors are player development. We know there are some teams out there that have had trouble with player development. A lot of them are, hey, if you're a prospect from another country like Puljujarvi, and all of a sudden you don't get a good foothold in your new place of living, that affects you. We've seen that with Anderson too. So those things are all factors that nobody knows what's going to happen with. And the only way you could have instant transition is when you get guys like Lafreniere, who are going to play in the NHL right away. And you're talking about 3 guys every year. We know that a lot of these guys aren't going to make it, but doesn't mean you still shouldn't project what they could be, because that's what we're talking about, is what they could be. Where's Marco Rossi going to go? He's an interesting one. I did just put up an article on Sportsology. He's Austrian. He's probably going to be the highest Austrian drafted guy ever, which is cool. Really good player. He played with Jack Quinn, so they were really dynamic with the 67s. And I don't think either of them made the other better. I think they made each other better. It wasn't going to be a situation where you say, well, one without the other is not going to be good. I have him going 6 to Anaheim because he is a center. I think there's a chance he could play in the league right away. And Anaheim could take some lumps and have him play right away because they're not looking at themselves as a playoff team right now.
Right.
And they need help in the middle. And so that is a kid who did a lot over the summer. He is definitely physically stronger. He plays pro hockey already. So that could be a decent transition.
Trivia question. The highest drafted Austrian was drafted 5th overall.
Thomas Vanek.
Bingo.
There you go. There you go. So it's going to be tough for him to get to that, but it could be.
Well, he could go 4th. It's possible.
And Vanek, and he became friends with Vanek. Vanek, here's the funny thing, and this is what's amazing about hockey. So one time after a tournament, Rossi said that Vanek called him out of the blue and just said, "Hey, if you ever need anything, I'm here for you." He didn't know from Adam. He just knew he's another Austrian kid that had talent. And over the years, they started talking, and now they're friends. And that's a hell of a guy, a resource for Rossi to have.
I'm telling you, when my daughter went to Austria like 2 years ago, 2 summers ago, for my daughter to play in a soccer tournament, and they were in this big stadium type, outdoor stadium type thing, and there were like 12-foot tall posters like hanging down things of Thomas Vanek and Michael Raffle. It was the funniest thing to see. Like, I'm like, yeah, these are two. I mean, obviously good players, but it's like to see these giant. They're like worshipped in Austria.
Well, talk about a once great player who became a journeyman. No, nothing is more stark than Thomas Vanek. He played the first 9 years with Buffalo, and then he played in the next 5 years. He played for 6 teams.
Yeah, I still go back and look at Vanek's goal with the Minnesota Golden Gophers. It was unbelievable.
He had such talent. He did.
He had such talent, but like Mike had said over the years, he really did get beat up in the crease, and it definitely hurt his arc because his arc was high.
Very, very high.
He had a high ceiling because he had a lot of talent, but yeah, he paid the price, man.
Yeah. All right, that is all the time we have for today, guys. We will be back again tomorrow with more of your exciting. We're going to talk more prospects. We're going to talk more rumors, and we're gearing up because we are 1 week away from the draft. Remember, folks, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you